The shovel didn't just bite into packed earth. It slammed into something unyielding with a sickening thwack, instantly followed by a furious, high-pitched hiss. The sound of pressurized water erupting from the buried line was sharp enough to make the worker, clad in a garish neon vest, physically recoil, splattering thick mud across his chest. A split second later, a geyser of water shot 20 feet straight up, a sudden, violent fountain that arced and drenched the clipboard held tightly by a middle-aged woman. She sported oversized sunglasses and a blindingly bright turquoise visor, neither offering any protection from the unexpected deluge. That woman was Cynthia Sterling, the imperious president of the Maplewood Greens HOA. And in that moment of sputtering shock, she had absolutely no clue she'd just ignited a war with precisely the wrong neighbor. I stood 20 feet away, garden hose limp in my hand, frozen. I watched, incredulous, as my front lawn was being systematically carved up by a crew that hadn't even bothered with the courtesy of a knock. They were tearing through my established irrigation system like it was worthless jungle vine, following a crude orange spray paint line across the grass. But here was the kicker, the detail Cynthia Sterling hadn't bothered to investigate. I possessed a legally recorded utility easement for that exact strip of land, filed long before Maplewood Greens HOA even dreamed of existing. More than that, I had a secret insurance policy, a contingency backup water line, installed years ago, running discreetly beneath the edge of their cherished brick paver sidewalk. Cynthia, in her haste and arrogance, had just thrown the first punch in a water fight she was woefully unprepared to win. It had all started innocuously 3 days prior. I noticed the sprinklers on the western edge of my property, the section bordering the community pathway, weren't coming on. Simple clog, maybe? Faulty timer? I spent an afternoon troubleshooting, fiddled with the controller, checked the valves, even dug up and replaced a sprinkler head. Nothing. That patch of lawn remained stubbornly dry. Curious, I decided to walk the line, tracing its path towards the silent zone. That's when I saw it. The fresh gash in the earth, the tire tracks, the ugly orange paint scarring my grass like a territorial claim. And standing amidst the nascent destruction, radiating smug satisfaction, was Cynthia Sterling herself, barking orders at 2 men in fluorescent shirts who were tossing shovelfuls of my topsoil into a wheelbarrow. No professional truck, no permits displayed, no notice. Just Cynthia and her clipboard, wielded like a royal decree. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" I'd asked, keeping my voice level. She didn't look at me immediately. "Mr. Blake," she stated finally, peering over her sunglasses, "you have unapproved underground installations encroaching on HOA common area. We're removing them. Consider this your notice." "Hold on," I countered, pointing towards the nearby survey stake. "This is my property line, clearly marked. And it's covered by a recorded easement." She actually scoffed. "This isn't your easement, Mr. Blake. It's our common use buffer zone according to the bylaws." I even retrieved my survey map from the garage. She refused to even glance at it. "Submit your concerns in writing to the board," she dismissed, turning away. The next day, my lawn looked like a battlefield. The trench was deeper, wider, cutting through my prized petunias. Water pooled near the boxwoods. My drip lines were slashed. Worse, they hadn't just cut the irrigation. They'd severed the crucial drainage line designed to protect my retaining wall from hydrostatic pressure during heavy rains. This wasn't just landscaping vandalism. It was reckless endangerment of my property. That night, fury simmering, I climbed into the dusty attic and retrieved an old banker's box. Inside, amongst yellowed maps and developer letters, was the jackpot. A utility easement from 1996, signed, notarized, and filed with the county. It granted my property the explicit right to install and maintain irrigation and drainage across that buffer zone. And crucially, it included a contingency clause, the right to a secondary route beneath the adjoining HOA sidewalk if the primary line was obstructed or damaged. Cynthia hadn't just damaged my system. She'd legally unlocked my backup plan. I waited until morning, watched her briefly survey her muddy handiwork, then approached, laminated easement in hand. "Cynthia, I believe you've made a significant error." She waved dismissively at the document. "We've consulted our bylaws. This zone is under our jurisdiction." I allowed a small, tight smile. This easement was signed and recorded before your bylaws, before this HOA even existed, Cynthia. It predates your authority here. Her face tightened. Challenge it legally if you wish. In the meantime, she thrust a paper at me. Here's a fine for noncompliance. $2,500. I took it without flinching. Perfect. I'll add it to the lawsuit documentation. That afternoon, I called my friend Mike Chun, a sharp contractor who owed me a favor. We spent hours with ground-penetrating radar, confirming the backup line's path precisely under the edge of Cynthia's precious sidewalk. You sure about this, Dave? Mike asked, playing hardball. They dug up my property without permission, ignored a legal document, risked my retaining wall, and fined me for it? Yeah, Mike. Let's tap the backup. By sunset the next day, it was done. Discreetly, expertly, Mike's crew connected the backup line, capped the old severed one, and concealed the new valve under a landscape rock. Full pressure returned to my western lawn. Cynthia hadn't a clue. In fact, when she noticed my grass greening up again, she had another fine delivered, accusing me of unauthorized water access. I laughed, framed it next to my easement copy in the garage, and went out to water my roses, humming softly. The real drama, I suspected, was just beginning. Cynthia had no idea what happens when you dig without locating utilities first. Her beloved sidewalk was about to develop some serious issues. The next morning began with a deceptive calm, the quiet hiss of my now fully functional sprinklers the only sound disturbing the peace. Every drop nourishing my lawn flowed silently beneath the HOA sidewalk Cynthia cherished, a secret stream activated by her own actions. Later that day, Mike returned, and we fortified the system, installing a lockable, hidden valve box. Cleanest sabotage job ever, Mike chuckled. Not sabotage, I corrected. It's enforcing a notarized easement. Cynthia, naturally, doubled down. Another fine arrived, stuffed in my mailbox, citing unauthorized activation of subterranean utilities. It went straight into the recycling bin. Then came the temporary fencing and caution tape around her trench, now labeled a future community beautification zone. It looked ridiculous and only drew more attention. Neighbors started asking questions, murmuring about the mess, the lack of a vote, the sudden project. Cynthia's arrogance was becoming her own worst enemy. Her next gambit was accusing me of tapping into the community water supply. She marched over with a reluctant-looking board member, Walter Davies, demanding inspection. Certainly, I replied calmly. Just arrange it with the county water authority present, or bring a court order. Cynthia flushed crimson, sputtered, and stormed off yelling. This isn't over. She was right. 2 days later, the sprinklers in her beautification zone dwindled to a pathetic dribble. The plants wilted. The board fiddled with valves, suspecting a blockage. They didn't realize their shoddy digging had likely compromised the soil stability under the adjacent sidewalk. Then, the first crack appeared on the brick pavers near the trench. I saw another board member examining it with concern during my morning walk. Might be water displacement from that trenching, I remarked casually as I passed. Shifting soils are tricky. He looked up, startled. The sidewalk wasn't the only thing cracking. At the next HOA meeting, the mood was sour. Residents were fed up with the mess, the lack of transparency, and now a visibly failing, potentially costly sidewalk. Cynthia tried to blame me, but the room met her with groans. Questions about lack of votes and potential liability flew. I stayed silent. The crowd was turning on her. Later, sharing a beer with Mike on my patio, watching my thriving garden, we toasted. To backup plans Cynthia can't touch, I said. But I knew she wouldn't quit. I had one more move planned, leveraging the county regulations she'd ignored. The chaos grew. An HOA sprinkler head elsewhere started sputtering mud. Cynthia's people were constantly digging, trying to fix self-inflicted problems. She even installed a cheap surveillance camera aimed at my house. I cheerfully waved at it, then found its unsecured Wi-Fi and looped squirrel footage to its feed. Then the White County Utilities truck arrived, parking right by Cynthia's disaster zone. An inspector emerged, summoned by a formal complaint, which I might have helped formulate, about tampering with irrigation tied to municipal runoff control. I met him at my door with my folder, easement, maps, photos of the unflagged digging. His eyes widened. You were ready for this, he observed. Let's just say I anticipated potential downstream issues, I replied. The inspection revealed the full extent of the damage. Not only had Cynthia's crew violated my easement, they'd compromised a critical county-managed runoff trench affecting multiple properties. The inspector was grim, noting multiple code violations, especially the failure to call 811 for utility locates before digging. When Cynthia rushed out demanding answers, the inspector coolly informed her of the unpermitted excavation and multiple violations. Easements and county utility rights supersede HOA plans, ma'am. You should have checked before digging. Cynthia was speechless, pale. The fallout was immediate. At the next meeting, residents were furious. Walter Davies resigned on the spot. Facing pointed questions about liability, Cynthia tried blaming me again. I stood calmly, holding her first violation notice. You fined me for using my legal infrastructure. You dug without permits, ignored the law, damaged a county system, and now blame me. Silence. No one defended her. A few nights later, my cameras caught her overseeing a different crew trying to secretly patch the now sagging sidewalk. I sent the HD footage, timestamped, to the county inspector. More citations followed. The county declared the sidewalk a liability, ordered it fenced off pending licensed repair, and opened an investigation into HOA misuse of funds. Cynthia vanished. No goodbyes, just gone. Rumor had it she sold her house and moved to a town without an HOA. The interim president, a nervous accountant named Richard Peterson, called an emergency meeting. I was invited to provide clarification. I attended, laying out my binder of evidence easement, photos, the damning nighttime video of Cynthia's cover-up. A collective gasp filled the room. The board quickly voted to suspend Cynthia, audit the funds, and negotiate a settlement with me. Richard called me that night, apologizing profusely, offering full repairs, and a public apology if I dropped legal action. I agreed, on one condition: amend the HOA charter to require mandatory board training on easements, permits, and utility regulations before approving any excavation projects. Richard, stunned, readily agreed, calling it the smartest proposal in years. Licensed contractors arrived, professionally repairing everything, upgrading my system, and replacing the sidewalk to code, complete with small markers indicating the easement. It was better than before. I hosted a small barbecue. Neighbors came, relieved, some apologizing for their silence, thanking me for standing up. Life settled. The new HOA board, led by a now more assertive Walter Davies, was reasonable. I earned a quiet respect. Cynthia tried a final, anonymous flyer campaign. Beware homeowners exploiting loopholes. But nobody bought it. I compiled a digital archive of the whole affair for the board and county, and commissioned a small garden sculpture, a hose turning into a fist holding a spade, inscribed, "Defend what's yours." Water finds its way. Even the mayor's office sent a commendation for civic responsibility. Sometimes I wondered if Cynthia ever drove by. Maybe she saw the perfect lawn, the new sidewalk, the sculpture. Maybe she fumed. But she started a war thinking it was a skirmish, never realizing I'd already won, not through aggression, but because I knew, documented, and defended the ground I stood on. And that, ultimately, made all the difference.